Good evening, everyone, and welcome to BT's Fly Tying Friday. Tonight, the 9th of May, we're having some help. The Beattys and the Buckner is going to be working on crayfish. We got some question marks there because is it crayfish or crawfish? Well, maybe we'll find out tonight. Maybe we won't. You never know. Weekly tip, we're going to be talking about indicators. Now, last week, we were talking about flies with motion. And here's a fly that might have motion. It's a Klumper's clouser. And does it swim? Well, let's see. Yep, it swims. That stuff is made out of artiste metallic floss from Hobby Lobby. Is it the best fly tying material going? I don't know. I wouldn't say it's that active in the water. Marabou's a little bit more, but still, it's more active than some really stiff hair. But anyway, we're the Beattys from Boise, Idaho, and tonight we're going to get some help with our program in that our good friend David Buckner is going to join us and help us discuss or learn some things about crayfish. And David, we're going to set you up for a PowerPoint presentation, and you just tell us when you are ready to get started with that.
Okay, and I'm going to move pretty quick, folks, but let's dispense with the first question Al had. Is it crawfish, crayfish, or crawdad? What I've come to understand is it's crawfish in the south, crayfish in the north, and crawdad in the Midwest.
They're called yabbies in Australia.
Awesome, Paul. But I've been fascinated with these creatures, and I really love tying them, and have done quite a bit of research. Not next as a setup for Al and Gretchen to tie. But the crawfish is in the family of crustaceans. So as you're tying them, think about shrimp, lobster, and crabs, and kind of the movement and activity of those creatures as well. But our focus tonight is going to be on aquatic dwelling species and not the terrestrial, not the burrowing species, which you see on the bottom. Those tunnels can be up to 6 feet deep. We see them a lot around my territory, really evidenced by those chimneys, which those things are 8 to 10 inches tall as they move the mud. And those guys live in those burrows year round, down in the water. If it's dry, they typically close the chimney up, which is very interesting. But there are a heck of a lot of species. You can see Alabama has 97, Tennessee 80, and Mississippi 70. Those are the top 3 states. But I did a little research. Gretchen, y'all have got 4 in Idaho. John, you've got 9 in Nebraska. Sherry, you've got 7 in Oregon. Fred, Barry, Dutch, and Jack, y'all got 42 in Texas. And Rich, 2 in Montana. And Alan, y'all got 59 in Florida. But you can see the Tennessee River Valley is the most prominent on that heat map. That's the main location. A little bit about their life cycle. You can see that their eggs on the belly of the mom, and they actually grow on the belly, and they actually molt 3 times before they birth into a small crayfish, and they are birthed with their appendages. Look like a full grown, but very tiny. One of the interesting things about crayfish and those species is their reproductive organs are like a lock and key, and they don't mingle. They don't crossbreed. You don't see variance between the species. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the species, but they stay within a particular line on species, and they will molt up to the first year 12 times every month, and they'll molt as they grow. A lot of people are confused because they think the blue crayfish is because of the molting, but the blue crayfish is like a blue lobster. It's a unicorn, 1 in a million. But those guys will molt their entire life. So as I started doing some research and actually went and interviewed the state biologist. This is a state poster of some of the species in Mississippi. and I got the biologist to identify which ones are most prominent. And you see up on the top left, those are dwarf crawfish, and we'll come back to that towards the end of the presentation. But there are different colors, and we'll talk about that on the next slide. But these are some of the most prominent in Mississippi. I would encourage you to find out the most prominent in your area, in your waters. So from a fly tying perspective, what do we need to consider? First of all, size. These guys range, the dwarfs are about 1.25, 1.5 inches long, up to 7 inches long. The color, which I thought was the most interesting thing that I've discovered, is Al often talks about flies and how they take on the color of their surrounding, their environment, and how we ought to tie. The color of crawfish is really related to where they live. More your red, rust, brown, and black in lakes and ponds, and more of your tan and gray in streams and rivers. And that really makes sense because they're taking on the color of their environment for the most part. And then motion. We'll talk about normal motion versus a defensive motion or posture. So the basic parts of a crawfish, and we'll start from the front of the antenna up front, and then a rostrum, or kind of the pointed nose of the crawfish. You've got a carapace, then you've got a abdomen in the back, and then a tail. You've got swimmerets underneath the abdomen, and then you've got walking legs. There's always 5 sets of walking legs, including the claws with crawfish. But those are the main parts that I try to replicate in a fly. What do crawfish eat? Well, everything eats a crawfish, and a crawfish eats everything. And they'll eat algae, leaves, sticks, fish, bugs, anything they can find in the water or next to the water. The motion, you see the normal behavior on the left, crawling, foraging, just a very slow movement. What we tie is more on the right because we're tying them while a fish is about to take them. And that's in a defensive posture with claws reared. And so that drives us to the hook orientation, with the tail being towards the eye of the hook and the head or the rostrum being towards the bend of the hook. So back to the dwarf crawfish. This is where I really dug in from a Mississippi perspective. And these are found kind of in the southeast, Tennessee, Alabama, Florida, Mississippi, Louisiana. But we discovered a dwarf crawfish, visited with the Magnolia Club in Jackson, Mississippi. And one of the guys had been fishing Bayou Pierre near Jackson, Mississippi, and discovered this really small crawfish, about 1 inch long to 1.5 inches, white bass tearing them up. And you see there are 2 species that are dwarf crawfish, very small, again, about 1 inch to 1.5 inches long. And it drove me to want to try to tie these guys. One of the guys up there was tying a lot of them, mostly in tan and gray, because he's finding them in river Bayou Pierre up there. But they also are pairing in browns and rust color. So I called Tony Thompson at River Road Creations. You can see his standard cutters there on the left, the set of 3 that he currently produces. And I started talking to him about producing one for a dwarf crawfish. And he was able to hand mold one on the left. You see it down there. It's about 1.25 inches, something like that. And so he made me a couple of those guys. Since then, I talked to him this week, warned him I was doing a presentation about his cutters tonight, and he has since made a jig and can produce those pretty readily. He's not going to expand the 3 cutter set, but he does have those available now. You just need, it's not on the website. You'll have to contact Tony to get one. And they're only about $15, very inexpensive. And you can see on the right what I've been cutting: furry foam in rust and brown, and some of the winging material, thin skin. But what I've really enjoyed cutting and tying with is the Kylie's Exo Skin, which is a rubberized backing or thin skin. Comes in some really, really great colors. But encourage you to try different skin products if you get one of those dwarf cutters. These are some of the flies I've tied. You can see these are the dwarf crawfish, so they're only about 1.5 inches, including the claws, probably 1.75 inches. But the body itself is about 1 inch, 1.25 inches long. But the one on the left is using tan, thin skin, and the ones on the right are using the Kylie's Exo Skin. Really handy. Burn a hole for the with a bodkin for the hook eye. Tying those with a jig hook. They've all got tungsten beads at the back. I've been adding a little lead wire on the shank. But those are the dwarf crawfish, and can't wait to get up to Jackson to try to catch some of those white bass. These are some of the books I've been digging through, as well as the web. But there's a Louisiana, Alabama, and Midwest crawfish book out there that you can get on Amazon. Goes through, the neat thing about these books is towards the back there are write-ups on each individual species that are found in that state. So really handy resources if you're tying some of the more prominent crayfish and trying to understand the attributes and tying them. That's it, Al. Any questions?
We seem to get a lot of the Mexican dwarf crawfish.
Right.
And they're a bright orange. In your research, would you say that's probably the only species that is that bright orange color? Because we seem to tie a lot of crawfish in orange.
Yeah, the bright orange, yeah, and even burnt orange, Dutch. That's where I started. I started tying burnt orange and rust colored, and really didn't understand the tans and the prominence of the tan and gray, especially in our area. And that's the more prominent crawfish for this area, and especially where I would fish it, which when I travel some, I'm going to fish ponds and lakes, but for the most part we're fishing streams, which is going to be that tan color. But yeah, you've got the ones we eat, the red swamp. That's what everybody kind of focuses on, is the red and burnt orange rust.
On the crawfish down here, you can find the same species of crawfish with about 9 different color variations, depending on the water that they're in. Like in Lacassine Bayou, they have been naturally selective. The ones that live to reproduce are the ones that hide best. So if there's a certain type of rock or vegetation and they closely resemble that, they'll be closer to that color. And you can find some of the same species on the other side of the state that you would put them next to each other and you'd swear it's 2 different species. So color is prevalent to where you're fishing.
Okay, guys, appreciate all your comments. And now we're going to move on into the fly tying section for tonight. And Gretchen is going to start the program with this fly right here. She calls it the easy crayfish?
Yeah. This looks kind of wild. I don't know why. It kind of got messed up from the time I tied it till now.
She put it over on my workstation, and I probably set something on it.
Yeah, I think so. But anyway, the history of this is we used to fish the Madison below bear trap with woolly buggers. And we did pretty good, imitating crayfish just with woolly buggers with our clients. But I did this, and it's just a modified bullywugger is all it is. And it seems to work a little better.
I would say that it increased my fish on the end of a line over the standard brown woolly bugger, probably increased it by about 30%. I'm just pulling a number out of the sky, but it was substantial.
And it's just a real easy one particularly for somebody who's kind of beginning. So I'm gonna tie today with the size 4 XL streamer hook. I didn't put any lead in it. One of the places that we fish on the mat or on the payette here, it's a little shallower, and so oftentimes I don't weight them. It seems like the material's enough to weight them in that particular area. I'm using a brown thread, a brown poly yarn for the shellback, claws is the brown marabou, copper wire, brown chenille for the body, and the hackle brown palmered, and then the tail is the poly yarn just fanned out at the eye. And then a thread head, which really there isn't much of a head, although I'll show you what I do with that. The most difficult part of this pattern is just remembering what order to put things on, because there's a lot of stuff. So we'll get started, and of course, my thread is the first thing. And the base wrap is not real that important. What would be more important would be the lead if I were weighting it. So we'll just start right here and do a quick base wrap. Okay, get that done. Okay, so the way I kind of think about this is the last thing that I wrap when I'm tying or when I'm wrapping the fly is the first thing I want to put on. So the last thing I'm going to wrap is going to be the wire. So the first thing that I'm putting on is wire. And this is from a telephone office.
ringer wire.
And it's just wonderful, really fine copper wire.
Yeah, if you were to buy this, you'd be about a gauge 32 or 33 if you're an electronics store.
So this I kind of tie on the far side of the hook. So we'll just I kind of hold it up on top, then it places it on the far side, using the thread torque to place that. Okay, the next thing that, next to the last thing that I tie on would be the poly. And so I've got some brown poly here, and I've already taken it and used my brush to brush it out. One of the things about poly when it's brushed out is it gets kind of wild. It's the best way to describe it. So in order to control it, I'll take and put this teeny clothespin on it, and that'll kind of control it. Now, as I place the stuff on the hook, I'm thinking about shaping the body, and meaning that I want it finer here, and it increasingly gets big as I go back. So I'm going to put this clear back here. And I want it right on top. Because what's going to happen is then it's going to fold up over this way. So we'll just set that aside, and I might as well cut off the excess here. Okay, so now the next thing that the third to the last thing that I put on, I'm going backwards, would be my hackle. So I've pre-selected some hackle. I was a little disappointed in this hackle, but I'm going to go ahead and use it anyway. It's a little lighter than what I really wanted, but I kind of ran out of time, frankly. So it will just have to do. And it probably in the water is not going to matter one knit. So I'm just going to take off some of the lower fuzz. And that should be about the right length. I'm going to tie it more to the near side. And it's not going to add to the bulk at all, so it really doesn't matter. Oh, you know, I need a little more stem than that. I want a little bit of bare stem to start off with. So you see when I wrap this, I've left some bare stem there. Okay. Now the next thing that I'm going to put on will be the marabou. The thing that you have to think about with the marabou is that you're going to want to divide it like this. So you can't just tie on a piece of marabou with the stem going clear to the top, because then you can't divide it. So there's two things you can do. You can just simply clip this out and tie it on, or you can, another thing you can do is to pull the fibers off and tie those on. That takes quite a bit of time. Sometimes I like doing that because I can get a really good fluffy bunch of marabou, but tonight I got pretty good. By the way, I didn't have the right color of marabou and the good poly yarn today. So I went to our closest fly shop, which is Anglers over on Overland in Boise, and it's an Orvis shop, and they always have what I need. So that's just a little hint if you're ever in Boise. Those guys do a good job for me. And I do like their marabou. So let's see here. Do I want to use both of those? I don't think I want quite both of them, but I want some from the other one too. So I'm going to tie this on I was tying it on the shank length, but it causes Al problems in the tail's too long and we can't see it. So I'm just going to do it.
It won't fit on the camera
It won't fit
angle.
on the camera, so I'm going to make it a little shorter just to accommodate my technician over here. And I'm going to tie it on about back 1/3 from the eye. Now I want a little bit more, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my other piece of marabou and just pull some off. And remember, whenever you're removing fibers from the stem, you want to pull on the fibers, not this, or you want to pull on the stem. I'm sorry, I said that backwards. And that way you can keep a firm grip on these and keep them even. So we'll just rip it off like that. And that gives me a nice bunch to add. We'll tie that on. Now, when I trim these, what I'm going to do is do a real angle on it. So it's tight. And then, so I'm leaving more there than I am here to help shape the body. So we'll tie this down. Okay. And I kind of like to start pulling it apart and looking at it although I'm not ready to divide it yet. There we go. And the final thing then, of course, is the chenille. So the chenille, I'm going to tie it on. And let's see, I think I want to tie it on back here to keep working on my shape a little bit. I did have to steam this today. It was on a card, so remember, if you have crimps in it, you can always remove those crimps by steaming it. Another thing too, you have to watch out for that, not catching that hook.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, let's tie this off. Some of those fibers so I get down to
Notice
the
how she
thread.
strips off all that crud so she can just get to the core to finish tying it down. Any of you thinking about going for your bronze, silver, gold, remember that little trick. It makes for nice, neat heads instead of big gobby ones.
Okay, now I need to wrap my feather, palmer it. And as you can see, it looks a lot lighter than it did when it was before I started wrapping it. So it was kind of a disappointment when I wrapped it, but I thought, well,
While you're wrapping that, Gretchen, what color is that marabou? It looks purple on my screen.
it does. It's actually called root beer. It's a reddish brown.
Yeah,
It's a brown with just some, it looks purple. That's interesting.
Yeah, it looks kind of purplish on our screen too, but
It's
in real life under sunlight, it's just a nice chocolatey brown.
it's got more red than a chocolate. I think it's
Yeah.
more of a, well, they call it root beer. It's Nature Spirit is the brand. At this point, you have a decision to make, and that is, do you want to trim the top of the hackle, or do you want to just pull the poly up over it? And I found it's just really, you need really to clip some of this. At least I do, because it just gets too wild if you don't. So I'm going to just trim this a little bit at the top here. And then I've got a whoopsie here that I don't like the looks of. Let me put my glasses down so I can see that better. All right. So I'm going to try to divide this as even as I can. It looks pretty good. Then if you kind of dress it with your fingers, and I know some of you wet your marabou to work with it, and it probably would be easier. But I have never been in the habit of doing that. I kind of like to see the way the marabou's going to look. So there we go. We'll just take a couple of wraps over this guy. And at this point, I do like to trim this. So and I like it to be about 2 or 3 eye lengths is kind of what I look at to do my. And then the other thing is I don't want it laying flat. I want it to stand up just a little bit. So I would take some wraps back here. So that I just think that looks more natural. And then the final thing, of course, is the wire. And we're just going to wiggle it through. And I actually kind of like to tie the first one kind of straight across. And then I will angle and palmer the rest of them. I just like the way that looks. And you know, the fish take a look at that and they think that's cool.
Oh yeah, they got their rulers out and measuring. You know that.
Hey, look at what that tire did. That was pretty cool. I don't know if you saw what I did, but I took and wrapped my wire around my thread a couple of times and then wrapped the thread. And the reason I do that is if I don't do that, I seem to get loose wraps on my wire, and that seems to keep that from happening, and it really ties it down great. And I don't helicopter wire. I just have never done that. I just trim it. Now, something you might see here is I do have, even though I was wiggling around, I do have some caught feather here. And if you want to be fussy, you can just take your vodka and kind of dress that out. Doesn't really want to come, but I think I got some of it out. Take a look back here. I got some back here, same thing. So I'll just take this and pull that out. There, that looks better. Okay, all I have to do now is a whip finish. And we'll just do 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's my easy crayfish pattern. So let's take a look at it if I turn it up this way. That sure does look purple, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does there, but that's it. It's not purple, as you can see when we go to the and when you see for the other side. Any questions for Gretchen?
Gretchen is Roger. Did you try putting the hook upside down so it's hook up and see how that works with your
we tie
pattern?
them that way. We usually put some dumbbell eyes in there in the mix as well. When you do that, it helps.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I've got some really cool eyes. I should have done that. We've got some really neat bead chain eyes that just look spooky, and we do put those on there sometimes too. That helps. That helps how it rides in the water.
In fact, the fly that I'm going to tie is almost always tied with the hook point up, is the way it's presented in the water. I'm tying it hook point down because I made the decision after an on-the-job injury that we weren't going to have any blood on the channel tonight. So it's going to be a hook point down, and you dress the fly however you wish. That's the way it's going to turn out.
Yeah, we did have one real injury, didn't we?
Oh yeah, it's on the job
Yeah.
injury. We filed it with the state. It's okay.
Workman's comp, yes.
Anyway, what we're going to get into the next fly. If I could have one crayfish pattern, this one would be it. It outfishes from river to river to river, probably better than any of them. Now, for those of you that don't know what a snaffle bit is, it's from the horse industry. It's used predominantly on young horses when they're first learning how to be a horse and carry a rider. And it's a bit that goes through the mouth with a joint in the middle. And you're going to see where the snaffle bit part comes in, because this fly was developed by a guy by the name of Jeff Smith, a cowboy and fly fisher who lives here in the Boise Valley. And anyhow, we got to be friends when we moved here. He was the president of the local fly fishing club, and of course, both of us being ex-cowboys, we had other things we could chat about. But for tonight, we're just going to talk about the snaffle bit part of the crayfish, and you'll see how it is after we put it together. I'm going to use a size 2 to 6. In this case, it's going to be a $200 hook, just because that's what I had that had a ring eye. And you'll see why I need a ring eye as the fly goes together. The thread's going to be brown. Antenna is going to be crystal flash and silly legs. It could be both or none. It's kind of up to you. The claws is a brown rabbit, but I've used marabou and chickaboo in the past. And all of them seem to work fine. The shellback is brown poly, or it can be foam, or Swiss straw, and I'm going to use Swiss straw tonight because it shows up good for photography purposes. The rib is copper, same as Gretchen was using. The body is brown foam and chenille, and we'll talk about that in a little more detail. Legs are brown hackle, and the articulated clip, it's weight, wire, chenille, and a shellback, and we'll show you how that all goes together. But for now, and I'm going to show you the roadmap fly, and here it is right here, and it's not in the vise because of when I say a fly in motion, the materials provide motion, and the flexibility of the snaffle bit provides motion. And the way this thing is presented in the water is the weight sinks, and you'll see how I construct the body, causes the fly to end up in the water like this, and it settles and sinks in the water column like that. with the head up in the fighting stance. And when you strip it, I can't do it here on screen so much, but you give it a good strip, and it does this routine at the end of each strip, and this routine as it strips through the water, and not too unlike the actual crayfish and how they react. So that's the roadmap fly. I'll just set that aside, and I'll get a hook out, just slip it into the vise. And remember, I probably, if I were these were going to my own fly box, the hook would be like this. It's not going to be though tonight because we're protecting the guy doing the tying. Okay, and I'm going to drop this down just a tiny bit to start out. I'll reach over and grab my thread, which happens to be the same color that Gretchen was using. And I'm not going to worry too much about a thread base, but I am going to put some thread right in here, right at the very back, because that's where I'm going to start. And I'll wrap down into the bend a bit, and you'll notice that on this curved shank hook, the bend starts way back here and curves down. And anyway, what I do is I run it down into that curved area a little bit more. It's kind of hard to describe exactly where the bend starts on that hook, but we'll leave it at that. Now I'm going to reach over here and grab my materials. And if you'll recall, that is a combination of crystal flash and silly legs. And I'm just going to tie those on, and they're extra long. They're not the same length and all that. I'm going to need that later to control it for a few things. So I'm just going to kind of cut this loop here out, and then I'm going to bind this in place. And I want you to notice that I'm really trying to make sure that my crazy legs or silly legs ends up a little bit to one side or the other, not on top of each other, because they will splay out to the sides, and that's what I want. Okay. Now we're going to talk about the construction of the fly a little bit, and that is flotation. The reason this thing gets into the fighting position is because there's flotation in the front end and weight in the back end, causing it to sink in the water column in that fighting position. Well, that doesn't just happen. So we're going to start out with some closed cell foam, and I've cut a strip that's 1/8 of an inch wide. Well, I estimated it at that. And I'm just going to take and trim the end here. But first, let me run forward just real quick. We're going to do a real quick lesson on wrapping foam. And we've done this for you in the past. And if you wrap foam so that it looks pretty, it probably is not going to float. And in fact, I'm going to make this look pretty. You make it nice and smooth, and you pull it tight. You see how that's looking all nice and smooth and everything? It's looking pretty darn good. That looks nice. Doesn't float anything because you just scrunched all the air out of it. In fact, let me back it up now. And I'm going to rewrap that loose. And now when we get out here to the part that wasn't scrunched down and I start wrapping it, I want you to notice that it gets quite a bit larger. No flotation, flotation. We're going to use that concept right now to form our body. We're going to be doing 3 things with the foam. We're going to be putting a shaping type of an application of foam, and then we will have flotation from the foam, and it will build up the underbody. So I'm just going to bind that in place right here. And let me just get this out of the way. And I'm going to wrap this really, really tight right at the first, because I don't care about the flotation so much there as I want to shape my underbody. And now I'm going to start relaxing just a little bit. So I want you to notice that these right here don't have a lot of flotation, but I should start picking up more flotation as I wrap back. And I'm going to give it a little bit more taper because I want it to taper a little bit smaller towards the back, so I tighten up a bit. So you notice I got flotation, less flotation, less flotation. And now I'm going to make this, no, I'm just going to leave that like that. I'm just going to bind it down. Like Gretchen's, there's so many things go on the front of this fly, you start forgetting which goes where. Now, you young people watching tonight probably don't have that trouble, but I tend to have a bit of a problem with it. Now, I am going to wrap back clear to the very start, right here at the back of the hook here. Get myself bound in right there so that I can add my Swiss straw, which is going to be the shellback, the carapace, whatever you want to call the darn thing. And then I'm using it. I probably use poly as much as I do anything, but this shows up a lot better in the type of construction that I'm doing here. Now, I want you to see I get that right back there to the end of that body area. Okay. Now, the next thing that needs to happen is I'm going to attach some chenille for the body. Well, I don't need to strip this stuff away to worry about like you do for when you're passing a test, because this is not exactly the kind of fly you'd want to be passing a test with. We're just going to wrap this in here, a couple of turns just like that, and then we're going to stop and back up here and bind that in place. Because the next thing that I want to do is attach the eyes. And we're going to talk about the eyes. Some of you may remember in the past about our eyes made out of truck mud flaps. Well, I'm not going to go through this whole thing like we did that time. We can do that some other time if somebody wants to know about that. But we're going to be using mud flap eyes tonight. And now I'll grab my...
From a parking lot in
Denver.
Denver.
Yes, it's a Denver mud flap. Not John Denver, or just a Denver. But anyway, I've got a piece of that cut off here. And the way you make these eyes is you take the piece of mud flap stuff, and I forgot to cut off one side of it. All right, there we go. It's about the same on either side. And all we're going to do now is take our flame and heat that a little bit. Now, the reason we like the mud flap so well is because it makes such a perfectly rounded eye. It melts nicer than anything else we've ever run across. You see that eye there? Nice and round. But anyway, I'll just set that down because for now I've already got one made with eyes on either end. And I'll just bind that in place right there on top. I'm not going to worry about getting it exactly even yet. I just want to get it in place there so I don't drop it on the floor. And now I'll crisscross it a time or two. And it's not quite even. There we go. That's looking a little bit more even. And keeping that so it's nice and level and flat and doesn't slip around. I could really bind some stuff in there, and I don't want to do that. Not when I have this stuff called UV glue. And I'm going to follow Susan Parsons' suggestion last week and make sure I keep the doggone sun off of my hands. But I'm going to set those eyes so they don't wiggle all over the place now. And they're just as solid as a rock. That's great. That's what I was looking for. Okay, good. Well, I have to go back to the recipe because I can't remember where I'm at now. Remember, we got materials on top of materials on top of materials that have to go in a certain order, all in the same spot. You had the same problem. I mean, it's keeping track of it. Let me
Tie a bunch of these. We tie them in stages.
and set
So
the hook
you
aside.
get so confused.
Oh yeah. Let's see. Oh yeah. Okay. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Okay, I know what I got next now. All right, let's get back here. We have to put on the legs. But before I put the legs on, I want to cover up some of this head area because the legs don't go on right at the eyes, they go on behind the eyes. And so I am going to tie that off right there. And if you recall that picture that David Buckner shared with us, the legs now come out of this position right here. And then additional legs, walking legs, are scattered along the rest of the body there. But I'm going to reach over here now, and I've already got a couple already pre-cut for me. And in case you're wondering, this is zonker strips, and it is they're 1-inch pieces. Now, whether that's the right thing or not, I don't know, but it seems to work. Now I'm just going to turn this up on its side and bind the offside one in place. Alrighty, now let's get the near side one in place and do that as well.
You know, I saw some awesome possum today at the fly shop. I bet that
I'll
would
bet
look
you that
really,
would work just
that would
wonderful.
work cool, wouldn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
would definitely work cool.
And they had good colors in it.
Okay, good. I got those in place. Great, there's that. Okay, now I need some more chenille, so I'll just get that out here. And I didn't steam mine. It's going to get wet in the tank, and it'll probably get puffed up pretty good after that. All right, we'll just bind that in place.
Well, yours has been on a ball, not on
Yep.
a
Now I'm just going to wrap a little bit more in here. Right up about to this point here. Because I need to add the other legs, which is going to be palmer tackle. And I've got a hackle over here just waiting for me out of that same bundle that Gretchen had. And I think I'll just take and get rid of some of this right here. Now, often I see people in tying these flies, they set the feather forward like you do tying a woolly bugger. And this fly is actually facing the other direction. So if you wanted to stay with the common theme of the shiny side towards the head, you want to have it go the other way. And that's what I'm doing right now. All right. Smooth out that foam just a little bit. Now let me wrap my body part of the way forward here. Right. And I'll stop right there. So that I can wrap my hackle in place. Up, I forgot one thing. Gonna back up. I have to put a rib in there. And rather than take the whole darn thing apart, I'm just going to kind of fake it. Wouldn't pass any tests for the bronze, silver, gold, but we'll make it work. I'll just tie it in like that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap the rib material back, and it's going to just hide in that chenille. There we go. And now I'll go ahead and wrap the hackle forward. And we'll tie all that off.
So the legs don't go clear to the eye. So on the one that I just tied, I wouldn't have to go clear to the eye with that chenille either, or with that feather either, would
No,
I?
you wouldn't. And the only reason I changed all that was that I looked at David Buckner's PowerPoint presentation before he did it tonight. And I said, that drawing of the actual crayfish the walking legs didn't go all the way to the end of the tail like we often do when we're tying the thing. Anyway, so now let me finish wrapping this in place. And one of the things I'm going to do is be very careful not to get this too close to the hook, to the eye. I do not want to be crowding that eye in any way, shape, or form. And I'm going to trim this off a little bit long, set aside that, and I'm going to get out my tweezers just to get that last little bit of fuzz out of there, because I don't want anything clogging that eye, because that's part of the snaffle and the snaffle bit that we're going to be creating here in just a little bit. And there we go. Now, I'm going to pull my carapace forward or backward, whatever you want to call it, and tie that in place, because it's only the carapace from part of it, and then the other part of it is something else. I forget what it was on David's drawing. But now it's time to wrap in our rib material that I had to add in panic in the last minute or so. And we'll just keep ribbing forward or backward, whichever way you want to call it. Trim that off. And now I'm going to trim this fairly close, because I want to keep that eye clear. Okay, let's make sure that that's sitting in place the way we want it. And that's all looking good, near as I can see. Yep. I'll whip finish this.
You've got a good shape to that body.
Yeah, it does, and that's all from the way you allow the expansion and the tightening of the foam underneath, because it's just a single layer of chenille otherwise. As you can see, that all from the foam underneath. And of course, you need that foam for flotation to push the fly into the fighting stance. But anyway, the next thing I'm going to do now, and we'll have a class at another time, but tonight I've already got the clip made. It's made out of 10 thousandths wire. I think that's what it is. I'd have to look it up. Don't quote me on that. Anyway, now that's going to be the clip part, and I have to move this now and put the clip into the vise so that I can work on the back part. And the reason I left these long back here is so I could grab them in a clip and keep that fly pulled back.
Let's do this.
Yeah, see how the fly is? It's pulled back here and anchored here, so that otherwise, if I don't do that, it falls down there. And how do you think I hook myself? I wonder. I'll just get this back up here before I end up doing it again. But I'll pull those out here and put this little clip on just to kind of hold stuff. And that keeps the fly back out of the way for me.
And that, by the way, is a hair clip. Actual.
Yeah, you get those at the dollar store. Okay, now let's get this taken care of right here. And I'm just going to try that again. Get a better hook on my finger with the thread. There we go. Now I need to add the lead eyes in here. And you've got options on that. You could do sinker bait if you wanted to, like if you were going to be spin fishing this thing. And I would never suggest that you'd spin fish anything on a fly tying channel, but if that's what you were going to do, you could just put a bullet head on your leader and get the same action that you would by what we're going to be doing here. And all we're doing is crisscrossing this lead eyes in place, if you will. Now, same as I did before, But those eyes are wiggly. You can see they'll wiggle around, and I'm gonna tighten them up just a touch. Use the UV. Following Susan's suggestion again. Keeping the UV light off of my hands. We'll just set that in place there. Nice and sturdy. Good. All right. Now I need the Swiss straw. And I'll just tie that in place. And now we need some chenille. And we don't want it to be any thicker than the other was because it's supposedly just an extension of the body up on the hook itself. Okay, and now I'm going to bring the Swiss straw forward and tie it at the eye or the loop or whatever you want to call that thing there. And I'm going to leave a little length for my tail. Huh?
Oh, I tried to do a close-up, but the vise is in the wrong position.
Oh, okay.
I can't do it.
And I forgot to put my wire on there for the.
Oh, why don't you use your thread?
I'm going to just do that. I am going to see how I went across the top there so it wouldn't show. And now we're going to come with the thread. And I'll whip finish that off. Now my tail is not going to stay spread out like this unless I do something to it. And I'm going to again use the UV to strengthen that. I'm not going to put it through the whole tail, just the base so it stays spread out. And that'll keep her all spread out.
That's a big crayfish.
That's a big crayfish, is right. And now I'll adjust the length of my antenna.
That's the fly we were using the time we floated the snake, isn't it?
Yeah.
For smallmouth.
Yeah, so I've got the antenna, whatever you want to call those, taken care of there. And now I'm going to put the hook back into the vise because you didn't see it, but off camera I just stabbed myself. This is a vicious fly, folks. It's a real pain in the butt to tie. I guarantee you, on the water, it's worth every minute you spend at the vise. Anyway, we're going to go for a swim. I've already got one ready here. I want you to see how this works. And we're gonna go over here to the tank and just get that thing all dropped off here. Get it wet. The claws aren't quite wet enough. But I want you to see how that hangs in the water there? Once those claws get nice and wet, it will sink just a little bit more. That's what I'm there. Now it's starting to sink the way I want it. Anyway, any questions on that one?
Yeah, Al, one real quickie. When you first started tying this fly, you said you needed to use a ring eye hook. Two questions. What is a ring eye and why do you need to use it for this fly?
Oh, okay. Well, let's get a ring eye hook and let's go to the vise.
Oh,
Okay. A ring eye is a straight eye. There's no up or down. You see that, John?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And if you try to do an up and down up or down eye hook with a snaffle bit on it, you're going to hang up.
Yep, I can see that. Okay.
But one question, Al.
Yeah.
On your tank, is that a rock or a potato?
Okay. No, it's a rock. It's a rock. It's a rock, and it's got a tube in there, and it's anyhow. It is what it is, Mike. It's kind of a work in progress. I tell you, it's
When did you put that rock in there?
today. When you see there's a tube in there where you're supposed to swim the fly in the tube, and for some reason I haven't had it in all summer, and now it won't stay in place. But a rock keeps it in place,
Oh, okay.
and it also looks sort of like a stream. So anyway, setting all that aside, if there's no more questions on the crayfish, I am going to go into the weekly tip. Okay, good, because the weekly tip is something you're getting ready to go to the stream, folks, and you're going to want this. Now, the weekly tip is about indicator rigging. Yes, strike indicators, and that strike indicator could be one that we made like last week, where it was actually a strike indicator on a hook, or it could be a fly like a stimulator or whatever you want your fly to be. And in fact, let me get this crayfish out of here. And you could use flies like this right here as your indicator flies. Now these are 12s and 16s spun hair flies, and they make really good indicators. But I am going to start tonight with an indicator that we built last week. And what we're going to do is I just got a piece of monofilament pulled out here so that I could show you how I tie flies on the monofilament. And we're going to call this tippet, even though it's six pound. It's going to be for now. It's going to be tippet material. Gretchen, could you hold this, please? It's thank you. Now, I am going to get ready to do what I call, this is the uni knot. You just throw a loop in here and see if you can see that. You run the tip end through the loop. I'm going to do it 3 times. I do the number of times based on the size of the tippet. A 7X tippet gets 5. One like this gets 3. And now you just pull it up tight. Okay, hold that, if you would please, sweetheart. There, great, thank you. Now let me cut this off, because now we get to the point of rigging our dropper fly. And I've got one of those waiting here for me. In fact, you're going to get to see one of my dropper flies. Darn, if it isn't a renegade with a bead on it. Oh dear. But let me tell you what, it's, well, the reason I'm showing you is because it really works. Anyhow, that's tied to the hook the same way. Now, most people put their indicator on the bend of the hook. Now, I have a loop here, just like I had on here that you saw me tie this on, and that's what I use to do my indicators. And if you were to do this, you would pull it up here and you'd start tightening things up. And it would slip up and get tight. And my problem with this is when it snugs up against the bend of the indicator hook, I want to, let's say I want to change it from a green stimulator to a brown stimulator. I have an awful time loosening that and taking it off, and I usually end up just having to cut it off. Well, we were fishing with a guy in Denmark, and dear friend, he came to fish with us in Montana a number of times, and he said, I'll show you how I rig my indicators. And he doesn't put them at the bend of the hook. He puts it over the hook onto the forward tippet. Now let me put this back in the vise. And then what he does is he just tightens this up. And then it can slide up or down. It fishes like that. It doesn't hang up one bit more than any other indicator one does. And if you want to change the indicator fly, all you've got to do is pull this way forward, change this fly, slide this back into place. Now that don't seem like much of a hassle, but let me tell you what, it has saved me a whole lot of frustration on the river trying to dink around with this changing the indicator fly. And I can't tell you how many times I just go ahead and fish an indicator fly that I really felt probably wasn't doing me a good job just because I didn't want to go through the hassle of changing it. Well, there it is right there for you. The indicator on a slip leader. And if you want to, there's some other things you can do with this, but we'll talk about that. This isn't a fishing thing, but there's some bouncing the caddis on the water things that you can do with this setup as well. But so much for that. Now, any questions in that regard?
Can I let go?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Oh, hold that line, dear. And he's going to tell us what he does to make a fly easier to tie on a tippet with shaky hands and bad eyesight. Bill?
Yes, sir. What I did is I found out I can take a magic marker and just mark the tip of the tippet while you're on the water. And so what I did is there's a piece of fly line right there that I marked. And then there is a little fly where I've actually pushed it through the head. And all I did then is I ended up rigging myself a little magic marker like this so that I can put it on my vest. And then I took one of my little containers and glued a piece of white foam to it. And you can still see I got a fly to it. And I can mark it while I'm on the water. It's inside my vest. I don't lose anything. And I can find all my tippet pieces so I don't have any tippet pieces going in the water.
What a good idea. I can't tell you how many times I've stood on the river trying to move around in the light to get it just right so I can get the doggone thing to shine so I can see it to go through the doggone eye of the hook. I know what I'm going to be doing on the river. That's where we come to sharing. Now, often in sharing, we have you share with us. And tonight we're running a little short on time. So the only sharing we're going to do tonight is what I'm going to do. And I'm sharing the blind leading the blind. And there's a couple of our friends who are often on this channel. In fact, one was on tonight. His name is Alan Cure. And he's competing in a blind bugger contest, and sitting next to him is Peggy Brenner. And if you want to know what they look like in real life when they're not competing blindfolded, there's a smaller picture of them down there. But this is an example of the blind leading the blind. That's it for this week, folks. Thanks so much for joining us. For now, it's a wrap until next time. See ya.